I had this experience where I became aware that I was in another place. I just woke up in this luminescent kind of white. It felt very foggy to my eyes, but it wasn't foggy. It just felt like I couldn't see completely. And I remember looking ahead of me and seeing these magnificent gates that were in my memory. If I estimate them, they were probably about 20 feet high and endless to either side. I couldn't see the end of them. And as I walked closer to these gates, I could see that they were closed, and amongst them, in this sort of silvery liquid stuff, there were all these plants and animals, some I'd never seen, and they were all moving and intertwining. And then I noticed that there was somebody walking towards me. I didn't know who it was, but I felt safe seeing them. I thought, I'm safe, however a child thinks of that. So I started to walk towards them. And this man came up to me and he greeted me by name. He said, "Hello, Carmel. I am Jesus." And sorry, it still makes me emotional. So after a few seconds, I realized that there was another being there who was hugely tall, probably 1.5 times the size of this man, Jesus, standing close by, and he also stepped forward. The most significant thing that I remember about him to this day is that I looked into his eyes, this being's eyes, and there were like galaxies inside his eyes, his irises, instead of being blue or brown or grey or whatever. They were like these galaxies of worlds. They were just like pinprick stars and things moving around. And anyway, he knelt down to talk to me, and he told me that he was the Archangel Metatron.
My guest today is Carmel Bell, who had a near-death experience when she caught on fire when she was only 4 years old. And on the other side, she met Archangel Metatron and Jesus. And Jesus told her that she would one day become a doctor. So it's a very interesting experience. And she has actually had more than one near-death experience. So I am really excited to talk to you today. Welcome, Carmel. Thank you for joining us from all the way from across the world in Australia. It is your Friday. It is my Thursday. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this interview.
Oh, and I've been looking forward to talking to you. It's an incredible encounter that you had. And it's always fascinating to me that someone has a near-death experience when they are 4, and then all these years later, it's still to you in your memory is as if it just happened instead of being like most of us, like a dream, which is
Yeah.
just so fascinating. So, why don't you start, if you don't mind, with what happened leading up to you having this near death experience when you were only 4 years old?
Okay. Well, what happened was my family and I lived in the country. So, it was very cold. It was the middle of our year, so it was winter. And I woke up suddenly. And I don't know why. Now, this had happened to me a few times before, and I'd woken up literally under my bed and under the rug that was under my bed. So I wasn't too fast, but this time I woke up and I was in my bed and I thought, oh, I can't go back to sleep. I'm bored. I will get up and go do some housework. I really loved housework. I actually still do love housework. My my mother, as an aside, was uh, raised by a very, very affluent and wealthy family in our country. So she'd never had to clean or cook or do anything like that before she got married. So she literally didn't know. It didn't go into her head. So I thought I'd get up and clean her sewing room for her. Now, I was wearing a nightie, and I got up and I walked through, it was like a maze of rooms, through another room and down an L-shaped hallway and into her sewing room, and started to clean her sewing table. And because it was so cold, I thought I would plug the heater in. And back in those days, like that was 65, heaters were often radiators with just like a couple of metal strips like coat hanger wire across them. So not very effective. Anyway, I turned that on and leant over it, and my nightie swung into it. But I was very engrossed in what I was doing, so I didn't realize that my nightie had caught fire. And in fact, I didn't notice until it had already burnt my lower legs and was starting on my thighs. And I ran. I was so frightened. I just ran. I remember screaming, but my parents don't remember hearing me screaming, and it probably no noise was coming out because of smoke. And I got as far as out of the room and down into the first part of the hallway, and I just collapsed on the floor and started to, like the flames really started to blaze. My father woke up and he saw a light on, and he thought, oh, it's all right. Jean must have forgotten to turn off the light. I'll turn it off in the morning, and went to go back to sleep. Then he realized that the light had been flickering. It wasn't a steady light. So he threw himself out of bed and just ran, and he found me on the floor burning. So he beat the flames out with his hands and rolled me over, and I wasn't breathing. So he sort of like kept beating me and shaking me, and I gasped. Obviously he'd pushed enough smoke out, and so I gasped. So that was a very brief experience. I don't know how long it would have lasted for. And because, I said in the country, and there were very few ambulances around, so he actually threw me into the back of his car and drove me himself to hospital where they treated me. But and during that time, I had this experience where I became aware that I was in another place. And there was no tunnel. I didn't go through any tunnel. I just woke up in this luminescent kind of white. It felt very foggy to my eyes, but it wasn't foggy. It just, like felt like I couldn't see completely. And I remember looking ahead of me and seeing these magnificent gates that were, in my memory, if I estimate them, they were probably about, well, to you and your parlance, 20 feet high and endless to either side. I couldn't see the end of them. And as I walked closer to these gates, I could see that they were closed, and amongst them, in this sort of silvery liquid stuff, there were all these plants and animals, some I'd never seen, and they were all moving and intertwining. And then I noticed that there was somebody walking towards me. I didn't know who it was, but I felt safe seeing them. I thought, I'm safe, however a child thinks of that. So I started to walk towards them. And this man came up to me and he greeted me by name. He said, "Hello, Carmel. I am Jesus. I am your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather." And till this day, I'm still puzzled by that. Like, why would he have said that to a child other than to try and tell me that I was part of his lineage? And Sorry, it still makes me emotional. So after a few seconds, I realized that there was another being there who was hugely tall, probably 1.5 times the size of this man, Jesus, standing close by, and he also stepped forward. And the most significant thing that I remember about him to this day is that I looked into his eyes, this being's eyes, and there were like galaxies inside his eyes, his irises, instead of being blue or brown or grey or whatever. They were like these galaxies of worlds. They were just like pinprick stars and things moving around. And anyway, he knelt down to talk to me, and he told me that he was the Archangel Metatron. I'd never heard of Metatron at all. I had no idea. And of course, the Transformers weren't a thing then, so, I didn't know Megatron either, you know. So I remember just initially being very happy to see them and feeling incredibly safe. And as I looked around me, this oasis kind of area sprung up, and I looked down and I could see sand, but close by there was like a pool of water, and there was a palm tree near there, and off in the distance I could see pyramids. Now, I'd never, to my knowledge, seen a photo of Egypt. I knew nothing about it. Uh, we lived far from the beach. Um, I had seen palm trees because, Easter Sunday or Palm Sunday or whatever. So I was aware of palm trees, and I've often gone over this in my mind, like, had I pulled these things from my mind, but I had no knowledge of them. So Jesus told me that I had a job to do, and that was to bring a very specific energy to the world, not just any energy or energy healing, but a very specific energy called Metatronic energy. And the other being with him had introduced himself as Metatron, and Metatron leant forward and he turned my hand up, and he put like a ball of energy into my hand. And he said, "This is my energy, and this will help you to heal." And I said to them, I want to be a doctor. I already knew back then that I wanted to be a doctor. I was surrounded by medical people. My father was a compounding pharmacist, and most of his friends were doctors or surgeons, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of these people around me, including my godfather. My godfather was a doctor, and he and I were very close. And Jesus told me that I would be a doctor, but not a doctor, that I would use this energy to heal people. I remember the grief still that caused me, because I knew nothing about energy at all. I had no interest in religion. I remember, in fact, telling a priest that I wasn't going to call God Father because I had a perfectly good father of my own. He was most perturbed by that and declared me strong-willed. But, religion didn't make any sense to me. And energy didn't make any sense to me either. Like medical things that I could touch, and Dad being a pharmacist, tablets that I could make, or serums, that sort of thing that I could make, were the things that made sense to me. But all of a sudden I'm handed this energy and expected to make sense out of it. So I talked to them for, I think, not very long, but it felt a long time at that stage. They also told me, or Jesus told me, that I would meet and marry a man called Bernie, which was incredibly, as it turned out, significant. I didn't know Bernie. I didn't know any Bernie at that stage. In fact, I'd never heard of the name at all. And I thought, all right, basically, we'll see. I don't like to be told what to do. Even back then, I didn't like to be told what to do. And really, from that point on, I remember starting to walk away from them and watching Jesus and Metatron. Oh, actually, sorry. There were two other people there because before I left, Jesus actually called forward two other beings and introduced me to them. And he told me that they would be my guides through life, but I didn't speak to them beyond hello. So I turned and started to walk away. And the next thing that I consciously realized is that I was in bed and I could feel that my body was in pain and that there were bandages on me. Because again, back then, they didn't put burns victims into a cooling water or bath. They basically put ointments on them and bandaged us up. So I was covered in a lot of bandages and I was in a lot of pain. I initially had no idea where I was because everything was a confusion from that point on, like trying to manage pain and so forth and stay alive, I guess. Before I died in that event, I had been a remarkably happy child. I had loved to wear dresses and frills and do up my hair and wear pink. Like pink was my favorite color. And my mother, in, times past, said to me that when I returned home, she didn't know who this child was. So she kind of stepped back a lot from me because I'd gone from being this extremely happy child to a child that was crying a lot and was scared of a lot of things. And I didn't want to wear any color other than black. I wouldn't wear any clothes that weren't black, apart from underwear and so forth. So my grandmother, God bless her, took it upon herself to supply me with black clothing, with a little bit of color in it and so forth. Of course, as research has gone on, they've found that that's a very typical response of burns victims. We all tend to wear black. It's a signature of a burn survivor, as we're drawn to black. I don't know why. But, I basically didn't wear any color other than black and until after my third near-death experience, which we'll talk about later. I wore solidly black. Even when I got married to my second husband, I was in black with a little bit of teal in there to cut it up. So
Wow.
that was my first experience, which was incredibly intense for this 4-year-old child. And I do remember saying to Mum afterwards, trying to talk to her about it, asking her if she knew where I had gone, where this place was. And of course, both she and my father thought I was incredibly disturbed and odd. And I remember clearly one day saying to her, Mummy, who's Metatron? And she said, where did you hear that name? And I told her that I heard it after I was burned. And she said to me, well, here's one of the archangels of heaven. He is the bridge between earth and heaven, and the only angel who has ever been human. So, but she was really puzzled and deeply distressed by my seeming oddness. And my father would do funny, crazy things to try and get me to get over fire because, again, we had open fires in the country. And when he would light a fire, I would get really distressed and run away. So he would do things like light a match and put them in his mouth to put them out, and get a flaming stick and run his hand through the stick to show me that fire didn't hurt. And he would get me to do it too. And I would do it. I kept trying to do it, but I would have like, I'd be in a state of panic every time because I had no trust that this thing wouldn't burn me again. It was, God bless him. Like, he did absolutely the best he could. There was no animosity between he and I for that. But certainly nowadays it would be considered not the protocol, you know.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
do you mind if I ask you some questions about this
Yep.
experience?
It's fine.
Okay. So you're 4 years old, and I'm just curious because really, on the other side, on a soul level, we're not an
Mm.
age. That's an illusion. That's a human constraint. Did you appear as a smaller entity on the other
Yes.
side? Because you did mention that Metatron knelt down to you.
Yes. I appeared exactly as I did in heaven. And through this experience and other experiences that I have had, I have actually learned, particularly if a person dies out of time, that they will go through the growing up period in heaven to reach adulthood. Because,
Interesting. Okay.
mm,
So Metatron, you mentioned these galaxies that you could see in the
mm,
eyes, and then you mentioned and talked about this energy that he handed you.
yeah,
Do you think that part of the connection of his energy is like a galactic, a universal energy? And can you describe to us what this felt like when he placed it in your hand?
yeah. Of course. Well, it was actually that energy that I used to heal my body with the burns. Like, I had a nylon scarf burned into my neck, and, you can still see burns on my body if you look closely enough, but it was a remarkable healing. They told my parents I would never be able to have children. I have four natural children. Um, but it was a very cool energy. Like, a lot of energies I know that people have demonstrated to me have been kind of warm. This was a really cool and light and sparkling energy. And in fact, just talking about it, I can feel it coming down into my hand, because I always bring it into my hand so that it doesn't go through me into another person, so that when I'm healing somebody else with this energy, it will be pure, not rinsed through my system.
Oh, interesting. So this
Mm.
energy, did you walk away when you were walking away? Did you walk away and keep it with you? Or was it more like a metaphor that you were going to have this energy and he placed it in your hand?
Yeah, it kind of, like, I'm not super clear on that because, that's one of the, like, foggy parts. I remember seeing the energy, but I don't remember walking away with it. But I knew that I was fine. I knew that I was fine. And my sense has always been that that energy was absorbed into me.
Okay, that
So,
would make a lot of sense.
yeah, it just sort of like went woof, and there were various things that happened to my body, like, that I still bare scars, but no scars. Like my lungs were very damaged, and that has impacted my life, not as badly as you would expect it to, but it certainly made a difference to the trajectory that I would have taken in my life. Like, I was a competitive sprinter, and my body is built for long distance running, but I can't do long distance running because I don't actually have the lung capacity for it.
Oh, interesting. Well, that
Mm,
makes a lot of sense. What
mm.
about your connection to Jesus? So, is there a physical way that you can describe what he appeared to you as?
Yeah, I love eyes. I take notice of eyes all the time. And he had these like grey kind of blue eyes. I would have expected him to have had brown eyes if anybody before this had said to me, "What does Jesus look like?" And he didn't have fair skin, but he didn't have like he didn't have black skin either. He had like a tan. He looked like he was tan, and his hair was dark but had sun streaks in there, and he had a beard. And I remember his hands were so strong, and his shoulders were quite broad, but he himself was a slender man, and he exuded kindness.
That's amazing.
Mm.
So then you were also introduced to guides. And when
Yeah,
they introduced you to them, did they tell you your guides' names?
yes, they
S-
did.
So can you share
Yeah.
them?
Oh, yeah, sure. Peter and Hiram, and they are still with me today.
I was going to ask that because you're 4 years old. Do you even know what it means when someone says to you, these are your guides? I don't know how a 4-year-old would even understand that.
I didn't, other than I had a concept of people who would help you, travel down a path or, from various things that had happened in my life, obviously, in language. And I was a prolific reader even back then. And, I learnt to read and write very, very young. And so there was a concept of who they were, but no real understanding of why they would, like what they were there for. Um, but I didn't worry about them terribly much for a very long time. I just accepted that these were the voices in my head, and that I thought everybody had voices in their head. And I don't mean like when you're talking to yourself. I mean whole like discussions. I'd say to them, I'd say to myself, I'm going to jump off the garage roof. I've always been like a really
Like
stupid
a
little,
daredevil.
look, I've crashed a motorbike, a boat, an aeroplane, right? A horse. I have done the stupidest things in my life because I will try anything. I've scuba dived, parachuted, mountain climbed, rock climbed, whatever. And if there's a risk to take, I very much used to take it. You know, it's like,
So
oh,
what
yeah.
was your first experience where you knew that your guides were guiding, helping, assisting you? Do you remember a certain experience?
Uh, yes, it was when I was probably about 10, and I used to go hedge running. So, in our neighborhoods, there was a lot of hedges, and these hedges we know were cypresses or whatever, and they would be very clipped and solid. And I used to like climbing up inside these hedges, getting on top, and then running across them like as fast as I could. So I was basically running across, tips of trees and sticks, and I would just burn through and then leap off, you know. And I remember one day they told me not to do it. They said, don't do that. And what I didn't realize is that the person who I was friends with the family who owned the hedge had actually been inside the hedge and had like clipped a lot of the inside branches and so forth to reduce the density and bring the hedge back in. And so there wasn't that thickness to to the hedge. So I did end up going through the the hedge canopy all the way through, and that was so painful because there was all these sticks and branches and whatever. So I got out of there covered in pine needles and scratches and scrapes all over me. Yeah, I thought maybe I'll listen a bit.
I love it. All
Yeah,
right. Well, do you want to share the next near-death experience that you had?
sure. The next near-death experience was I I was 17, I think 17 and 9 months, I think, from memory. And I had recently married to a man called Bernie. Now, to lead up to that, at 15 years of age, I just turned 15, so I was 15 and 6 weeks old, right? And my parents forgot to give me a Christmas present. Now, I'm one of 6 children, and this is Christmas Day, and they handed out all the Christmas presents, and there was nothing for me. And they kind of realized that there was nothing for me. But to me, that confirmed that I wasn't really part of the family. And so I went into my room, packed a bag, and I walked out, and I didn't see my parents again for about 2.5 years. And I walked out and I went down to my boyfriend's house, who lived fairly near, and this is Christmas Day, and it was his birthday anyway. He's a Christmas baby. And I asked him if I could live there with him. So he asked his parents, and they said yes. So I moved in with my boyfriend at just over 15 years of age. And anyway, we decided, because we all kind of rode like motorbikes, dirt bikes mostly. We were kids. But about a year and a half later, we decided that we would start a motorcycle gang just for giggles. Like it wasn't anything serious. So we all got around and came up with a name. There's about 17 or 18 of us in this little gang. And riding, dirt bikes. Nobody even had a street bike still at that stage. And we called ourselves the Executioners, which we thought was an absolute hoot. And to further the hilarity, I was named president. So I was the boss of all these guys, and I was the only girl. Anyway, um, a few months later, we were all out. A lot of the guys had got their license and their motorbikes then and so forth. And so I was always pillioned on the back of another person's bike. And we're at a fish and chip shop near our home. And this guy rolled up on a motorbike, like it was Yami 650, I think. And he looked like this dead serious bikie, filthy with a shaggy beard and long hair and, whatever rings and blah, blah, blah. And a few of the guys knew this guy. I had no idea what his name was. And they knew this guy. And so he started talking to them. And then he asked if he could become a member of our gang. And they said, sure, if you can get past our president, giggle, giggle, you can join. So he said, well, who's the president? And they pointed me out. And my nickname was Boots, because I always wore boots. They were the easiest footwear. And he came up to me. He said, oh, I hear you're the pres and I've got to get past you to join the gang. And I said, yeah, sure, okay. Take a swing at me. You get one hit. He goes, oh, I can't hit a lady. So I swung and I knocked him and I broke his nose, fractured
What?
his jaw, and he's out on the footpath out cold. And I got so annoyed at that I gave his ribs a few kicks as well. Anyway, and then eventually he kind of came to. I don't know why we didn't take him to hospital, because we really should have, but we didn't. And I told him he could join. So he did. I said, "Oh, by the way, what's your name?" And he said, "Oh, my name's Zeb." Right? Thought nothing of it. So he hung around with our gang for, a while. He kept hanging around. And I was aware that he was very interested in me. And he was very kind to me. And I found I was very interested in him too. But I was with my boyfriend, Red, or Ian is the real name. So, not too much happened. Anyway, one night I'm in my flat, home alone, waiting for all the gang to roll up, and they didn't. And so I'm there by myself, bored out of my mind. And then one of the gang members rolled up, and I said, "Oh, where's Red?" And he goes, "Oh, he's over at Zeb's house." I said, "Something's going on, isn't there?" And he said, "Yeah, there is." And I said, "Take me there." And he said, "I can't. They told me I couldn't." And I said, "You've got to. My life depends on it. I need to go." We used to call him Fat Gut. So I said, I need to go, Fat Gut, because he was a large bloke. We were very kind. And anyway, so he did. I ended up convincing him. And I walked into Zeb's house and through the house and into a bedroom with all these guys just being silent, sort of like, directing me silently. And there was my partner, Red, in bed with this other woman. Right. So I basically said, "G'day, Red. G'day, rude word. Um, that's it. We're over." And I walked out and I straight up to Zeb and I said, "Get me out of here." So he did. Put me on the back. He was riding a Harley at that stage, and he put me on the back of his bike, and we went off together. And but we weren't together initially. We were just like, he was looking after me. But we ended up falling in love. And I remember asking him, like, "Zeb's not your name. What's your real name?" And he said, "Oh, my real name's Bernie." And I was floored, absolutely floored, how this had worked out. So about a week later, I said to him, "Oh, I suppose you should probably meet my family. I haven't seen them for years. Come with me." So he rode over to my family's house, walked in the back door. We're both, on the Harley, in black leather, both of us, pants, jacket, half-face helmets, whatever. Walked in the back door where my parents were sitting in the family room with a couple of my siblings. I have a large family. I go, "G'day, Mum. G'day, Dad. This is Zeb. We're getting married." And it was a joke. Right? But Zeb actually said to me, or Bernie said to me, "I think we should get married." So we did. And anyway, so married. And shortly after we married, I fell pregnant, which was very disappointing to both of us. But, whatever. And then I had a miscarriage. So my doctor said, "We better do a D&C." So I was put into hospital and he did a D&C. And during that operational procedure, I died. And I remember standing, like there was me standing in the operating room watching all these people. But then suddenly I'm in this other space again. And Jesus came up to me and he said, "Carmel, you've married the wrong Bernie."
No, what?
Yes, yes. He said, "This has to end," he said. And then he showed me two futures. He said, "You can stay with him and this will be your future." And it was kind of boring, like housewife, looking after kids, being very disappointed, very sad, or I could take the energy that I had and I could turn it into something amazing. So next thing I knew, after Jesus told me that, I remember being very distressed. The next thing I knew, I was back in my hospital room and I was awake and having, like the small water and dry bread sandwich they give you. And my doctor came in to see me and he said to me, he said, "Oh, we had a bit of trouble with you while you were in surgery. So, the operation didn't take as long as it was meant to, but everything should be fine." And I said, like, "What happened?" And he said, "Your heart stopped. So we had to stop the operation to restart you." So obviously they had to start washing anesthetic out of me and all sorts of stuff. But I remember from that point on that I knew that this relationship with Bernie was finite. And I did fall pregnant again to him, and we have a glorious son together who's 44 years of age now, and a very good friend to both to his father and I, and his step parents, which he has two, obviously. So, he's a total delight. But, the grief that I felt knowing that to fulfill the destiny that heaven wanted for me came at such a cost is not an easy thing to describe. Because, I don't regret that it ended, but, every year on our anniversary, he or I will ring each other and we wish each other happy anniversary. And we tell
It's
each other
amazing you're still friends.
we love each other deeply. We really do. We went through years of hell. Bernie was very distressed at me leaving. It drove him off the planet into a very dark place
Did
because
you
he,
explain to him why you did and what you saw and what you were told?
yes, I did. I tried to at least, but he's agnostic, I suppose. He was
Mm.
raised Catholic, but he is agnostic and he doesn't believe in all that mumbo jumbo.
Which is interesting because when you're really close to somebody, they have some level of credibility just because you know them so
Mm,
well. It's
mm.
interesting to me that that didn't translate into him believing in you.
It didn't, which is exactly why the relationship had to end, because I wouldn't have been able to continue traversing this path,
Right. With
staying
your
with him.
destiny.
Yeah. And I also couldn't stay at home, living at home. I had to leave because if I'd stayed at home, I wouldn't have been able to go on this path. Like my parents, before I left, had actually had a Catholic priest in to exorcise me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they genuinely thought there was something, and they were going to commit me into a mental institution,
You're the
you know.
second person that I've talked to in the last week who, around the time that you were young, either yourself or had a parent that because of their abilities, like nobody's getting burned at the stake anymore. They just take them and throw them in an institution and call them
Yeah,
crazy.
yes. Look, people are not being burnt at the stake, but they might as well have burnt me at the stake because my profession, sadly, did as much harm to me as it did good, at least initially, and including to my children, because a lot of my kids haven't, like, I've had to move them out of schools because of bullying, both emotional and physical, because of my profession. and parents not letting their kids play with my kids because of my profession, and so things like in the last, I suppose, 20 years in particular, things have advanced to a much more peaceful place. But still, depending on which community you go into, it can be a very virulent and unkind community, you know.
So you were 17 years old,
Mm,
17 in a few weeks when this second near death experience happened, and you'd had the one when you were 4.
or
Will
yeah.
you describe to us how you became different with the abilities that you were able to bring into this human incarnation after those experiences?
Well, from 4 years of age onwards, I could see energy coming out of people, so I could tell if somebody was lying to me. I could tell if they were sick. And for instance, I'll give you like the most clear example I can. After I got out of hospital when I was burned, my godfather and godmother came down to the country to visit me. Now, Jerry, my godfather, was a GP. Anyway, he walked into
General
the house.
practitioner, for those who don't
Yeah,
know what that
general
means.
doctor. Sorry, yeah, general practitioner. He was a medical doctor, and he walked into the house, and he adored me. I don't know why, but he absolutely, I was the light of his life, and he picked me up and swung me up, and then pulled me to him and just enfolded me. And I remember getting this odd feeling, and I leant back and I put my hand over his heart and I said, "Uncle Jerry, what's wrong there?" And he said, "Oh, nothing, Carmel, nothing to worry about." And he popped me down and told me to run off and play, which I did. And then 2 weeks later, Jerry had a sudden cardiac arrest and died.
Wow. And what did you think after that happened? I'm sure you remembered saying what was wrong here. What did you
Yeah.
feel?
Well, I was incredibly conflicted. I initially felt that I had somehow partly caused it. I felt to blame. I felt wrong because I hadn't told um like his wife or anybody in authority, as it were. I think I told my parents that I thought something was wrong here, and they had dismissed it. And I went into quite a depression from there because Jerry was, you know, he and I had I don't know, for some reason, quite a unique relationship, you know.
But from
Yeah.
what you know now,
Mm.
you you could not have affected it. You could
No,
not have stopped it. You could not have changed it, correct? Because when it's somebody's
yeah.
time, it's somebody's time.
Well, there is time and then there is time. You know,
Okay.
it's like, for instance, I was told when I was 14 that I would die at 47. I died at 47, but here I am again.
And do you think that's because something changed from the time that you were 14 to when you were 47 that allowed you to stay longer? Do you think you free willed it? What do
No,
you think happened?
no, I renegotiated it when
You
I was
renegotiate
70.
it. This is interesting because this is something I haven't actually ever had a conversation with anybody on this channel about.
Mm,
It's something I talked about in one of the videos that I did called Uncover Your Soul's Purpose, What You Don't Know Is Holding You Back. And that
mm,
is that we have the ability to renegotiate contracts with
mhm,
people, soul contracts. And
yeah,
I think a lot of the times when we do this, it's when we're sleeping and our physical body is sleeping and we travel to the other side and connect with
mm.
our guides and we have these conversations and we can renegotiate, change things around. And I wondered if you had a perspective about that.
Well, look, um, I do. I know there are some people, particularly people who haven't died, will disagree with me, but I'm I'm an astral traveler,
Okay.
and I've taught lots of people to astral travel. I have had very intense dreams that have helped me at times, and I've also died 4 times. And I can tell you that those other experiences are completely different
What
to
other experiences? Do you mean the astral experiences?
astral traveling and
Hmm.
dreaming, lucid dreaming
Yep.
are not being dead. Completely different.
Okay.
Completely. In indescribable ways. But it's like if I showed you a photo of France and you look at it, stare at it and wish it and manifest it and love it, does that equate to going to France?
No.
Exactly. You cannot understand the intensity and the depth of being dead by wishing it so.
No, I
And
understand that. But I
mm,
think that when we are in a state where our body is asleep and our mind is available to have conversations with the other side, that we could negotiate, change,
mm.
rearrange our contracts. If not then, when would we do it?
Well, I've tried to renegotiate parts of my contract in spaces other than being dead, and I'm still
Oh,
waiting.
so you're saying that the only way that you renegotiate a contract is it's your okay, I see what you're saying, because I have had a lot of people who have had near-death
Mm,
experiences
mm.
say that they were given a choice, meaning
Yes.
that was an exit point, they could have taken it,
Yep.
or they decided, no, I'm going to go back. And Peter Panagore is a really interesting example of that,
Yeah, I
because
know,
he
Peter.
was told by God, it is your time and you
Mm,
can go back because I will give you the free will to do that, but you will
mm,
completely change everything about your life by
mm.
going back. And he still made the choice to do it. So I do understand where you're coming
Yeah,
from and what you're saying now. Got
yeah.
it.
I know, Peter. And the
Yeah.
same thing happened to me by coming back. I changed
So at
everything.
47, you renegotiated when you died and went to the other side and said, this isn't going to be my time. I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
And why did you make the decision to come back? What was it that made you want to come back?
Because my husband and I have 4 children, all of whom are difficult children, 3 of whom are on the spectrum, um, and have been quite severe. And I knew that it would be unlikely that he would be able to survive on his own with these kids. And even if he met somebody else and formed a new relationship, if you don't, if you have no solid commitment to children like this, why would you stay?
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
then this wasn't your only near-death experience. You also had one more after that, correct?
Yes.
Do you
Yes, I
want to
did.
share that one too?
Yeah, sure. When I was, I think I was, oh no, I was 29 when James was born. So I had left Bernie. I'd gone on with my life, and I'm waiting for this other mystical Bernie to arrive. I met, I had met another Bernie when I was young. My best friend's dad was Bernie. And then I met a priest who was my mother's best friend, whose name was Bernard. And I thought, oh, this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And anyway, I'd gone out with Bob and the Bruce, thinking maybe I remembered the name wrong. Maybe it was B, you know, Bob and Bruce and God knows who else, and they were all wrong. And then I met this man whose name was Jeff, and he was really lovely. We ended up going out together, and then he moved in with me, and we got engaged to be married. But after I met him, I got this incredible sense that I'm trying not to extend the story to too long because, whatever. I ran a fashion, was a fashion designer, so I have a fabulous wardrobe. And I got this sense that I had to go outside and get the local paper because it had just arrived. So I did. And I opened it up and it dropped open to a page that had an ad for clinical massage. Now, I'd never had a massage. I didn't ever want to have a massage. I didn't like people touching me because burns victims, it's another thing. Anyway, so it was to learn clinical massage. It was starting that night. And Peter said to me, "This is what you need to do." And I thought, what? Massage? But I had this irrepressible urge to go enroll. So I did. Put my work aside, jumped into my car, drove to this massage school. I enrolled starting that night, went home, looked after my son, blah, blah, blah. And when the time came, I drove to this school, went up into the classroom, and I'm looking around going, where are the models to massage on? Like where are the victims kind of thing, not realizing that the students would be the victims. And I was one of the first there. I'm sitting up the front, and this sort of like little crowd of people came in the back door of the classroom. And Peter said to me, "Turn around, he's here." So I did. I looked over my shoulders, and this man, who was the complete antithesis of anybody I'd ever gone out with before, looked up at me. And all I could see was these amazing blue eyes. Just, we looked straight to each other, and it was like the whole room went silent. Nobody, nothing else existed. It was just done. Anyway, he came up and he sat with me instead of with this whole group. And he said to me, "Oh, hi, what's your name?" And I said, "It's Carmel." And he sort of got this funny look. And I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Oh, it's Bernie."
Then you knew for sure.
Yeah.
And you said he kind of hesitated when you said your name. Did he know something as well?
Ah, the interesting thing is he has a sister who is Carmel. And he was actually told when he was a child that he would marry a Carmel because he actually has pretty much the same gifts that I have.
How crazy.
Right. So he
Or
was told,
serendipitous.
serendipitous. He was told that he would meet and marry Carmel. And he spent his life going, how crazy is that? Well, my sister is the only Carmel I know, and I'm not marrying her. Right. And then there was
Right.
Carmel, and he was like, whoa, you know. And he had the same thing. Like he'd never done massage or anything like that. And he got this irresistible urge to go join this class, this school. Had to be this, because it run 2 nights a week. Have to
Okay.
be.
This, you've got to elaborate on this because I think that we have very significant soul contracts with certain people that we are
We do.
destined to meet. And
Yeah.
if you only lived under a tree and that was the only place that person would walk by because you are
Yeah.
destined to meet them. And
Yeah.
I want to really point this out because I think it's incredible that you were told you was going to be a Bernie, you found another Bernie, you were told it was the wrong one, but you knew on every level, as did he, when it was
Mm,
the right one, and you both felt that draw to be there because there's a destiny behind some of these things because of what we
mm.
come here to learn. So, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit so that people watching can understand what that means?
Oh, I'm not sure how, like, is there any specific elaboration you want on that? I mean, I do believe that.
Just the fact that we have people that we are definitely
Yeah,
destined to meet.
we are. And they don't have to be love partners, life partners. They can be friends. They can be sometimes even combative people, people that we find are kind of destructive in our life because we have things that we need to learn. But for me to advance in the field I'm in, being a medical intuitive, I needed Bernie because he actually kept me going in this massage course. And through that, I learned anatomy and physiology and so many other crucial things that I needed to be a medical intuitive. And I wouldn't have stayed, I would have left the course halfway through if Bernie wasn't there. And the same thing for him, and
Interesting.
he needed me to complete his destiny. And the coincidences that have happened in our life, like for instance, we found out that, he's a sept of the clan that I'm in. So we are distantly related. Um, he, uh, he had a sister Carmel. My Bernie, my first Bernie, B1, had a sister named Barbara. And he actually met after me, a woman, Barbara, who, so he married his sister's name. Bernie married his sister's name.
That's
You know?
crazy. I love it. So will you
Yeah.
explain a little bit to people who are watching who don't understand, what do you do as a medical intuitive?
As a medical intuitive, people come in to see me. I give them an hour. So basically, I say to them, they fill in a form basically saying what they're concerned about, which I usually don't look at apart from to get the date of birth until we're finishing. So I let my guides choose what they are concerned about. They sit on a chair opposite me, so we're sitting and we start to talk. And over years, I've developed a series of questions that I know will rouse things like if you want me to look at your bowels, for instance, I might ask you what your favorite game was as a kid, right? So that connects to the bowels and boof, up it goes, and I can actually then examine the bowels quite closely.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you only do medical intuitive for people that are located where you live in Australia, or do you do it all over the
No,
world?
all over the
Because
world.
you would have different games in the United States, my guess is, than you would have as games that were popular in Australia. So how do you
Hmm.
discern that, or just have you learned over time?
No, well, I've worked a lot, traveled a lot to America and taught over there and seen clients. Um, so, I'm fairly familiar with, you know, as a visitor can be. Obviously, not having grown up there, I don't know anywhere near as much, but a game's a game. And all you have to do is say, what was your favorite game? And they might say, oh, my favorite game was hopscotch, you know, or what was your favorite book to read, that kind of thing. So there is lots of similarities, but in every culture, what religion did you grow up in, and are you still into that religion now? That
And
kind
so
of thing.
how is knowing somebody's favorite game, how does that help you or trigger something for you to understand about
Oh,
them
it's
medically?
irrelevant. It's what it shows in the body, and therefore I know where a disease started or where a condition started, or like if you've got a condition, we'll stick with the base, that has started in areas that are affected and controlled by the base chakra, then I know beyond shadow of a doubt that this has to do with your family,
Oh,
your tribe,
interesting. Okay.
right? So
Mhm.
then I will, if that is shown after I've gone through my normal checks and balances, if that is the area of most concern, then we start streamlining it. Like, who's your best friend? What's your boss like? What are your colleagues like? That sort of thing. And I will find like every session's different and it can be quite complex, and well, it is very complex. So it takes a lot of skill to actually pick where you need to head and what you need to put aside for now. Like this is doing okay. You've got a blister on your thumb. compared to you've got a massive verruca on the bottom of your foot, you know.
Right,
Are
right,
we going to worry about the thumb? No,
right.
it's not.
So for you, do you subscribe, do you prescribe things for them to take, supplements, medications, herbs,
Very
food,
rarely.
or are they just, are you doing energy work to clear these
Energy
things?
work. Very
Okay.
rarely do I prescribe. Sometimes I do, but I'm very careful in that. You know, if it is a particular medicine I know they need, like a prescription medicine, I will ask them to go back to their doctor and talk to them about it. Very few doctors will refuse to prescribe what I ask for. I'm actually very accepted in the medical profession over here.
Oh,
In fact,
interesting.
I'm the only non-medically trained member of the Integrative Medical Association. So I'm the only not doctor in,
Not doctor, doctor.
yeah, yeah. And a fair proportion of my clients are doctors themselves. So I help them with their own issues, and they refer, like, there was a period of time where I was way too busy for my own good. And so I used to insist that every client that came to see me had a referral from their doctor. And, you know, so I could consult with the doctor, like write a report back with what I saw and whatever. And every single one did.
Wow, that's incredible. So do you
Yeah.
only work with people or have you worked with animals also?
Oh, no, I work with animals. Yeah. I do a lot of work with animals,
That's amazing.
but
And
I don't
so,
advertise that.
yeah. I just, I don't know. I just had a feeling that you did. I don't know why, what why it was. It just kind of popped in.
Yeah.
So for you, can you tell us maybe what was one of the most incredible things that you were able to help somebody release as a result of moving and using this Metatronic energy that you have access
Mm.
to?
Oh God, there are so many things. Um, one of the stories, I guess you could call it, or one of the cases. Oh, look, I don't know. Oh, gosh, so many. My head's just going, brrr. You know, what's an interesting one? Like, it was probably only a year ago, a young woman came to me and nobody knew what was wrong with her. She's getting all these odd symptoms. And I looked at her and I said, well, what is actually wrong is you have a brain tumor in your pituitary fossa. And, you know, like, while I'm giving that to her, the human mind is going, oh my God, you know, because it can create a lot of fear in me too, having to say these things, but that's what I'm there for, you know. Anyway, she took that, went to her doctor, said, I want a CT scan with this, whatever, and turned out I was correct. So they were able to operate and put her on medication for it. And some months later, she actually emailed me and thanked me for saving her life.
Wow, it's pretty
And
incredible.
I get a lot of those kind of things. And even before I went into medical intuition full time, I remember when I was dressmaking, I had a client come along to me who I was making, we're doing a final fitting on a dress. And she came into my room, fitting room. She was pregnant. And my guide started saying to me, like Peter started saying, she needs to go to the hospital. She needs a doctor now. Her baby will die. Uh, if she doesn't. And I said to her, Patsy, I know you don't know this about me, but I'm a clairvoyant and this is what I'm being told. And Patsy said, oh, I knew it. I knew there was something wrong. So she walked out without completing her fitting and she went straight to her obstetrician and she said, told told him what I had said. And he said, oh, well, there's one way to confirm or deny that. We'll do like an ultrasound. So they did. And what they found was that she had, growing alongside her infant daughter, there was a cancerous growth in her uterus that only grows in women and only when they're pregnant. And what it does is it starts off tiny, the baby grows, it's tiny, baby grows, and then as the baby gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it grows and it eventually like will overtake and kill the baby. So the baby will obviously be born dead. So what they did is they threw her in hospital and she was far enough along that they performed an emergency Caesar, removed the baby, removed the cancer, put the baby back in, left her in hospital to bake a little bit longer. They wanted the baby's lungs to get a bit stronger. So she was heavily monitored, and the baby was successfully born sometime later and would be probably around, late 30s, 40
I
nowadays.
have never ever heard of a baby being taken out by cesarean and put back in. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's the only time that I can recall
Yeah.
knowing about it. But
Mm.
they could leave the baby in there and this tumor would kill the baby, or
Wow.
they could try an experimentation, you know.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
mind you, I'm going on my clients telling
Right.
me what
Right. Of
happened.
course. Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. Of course.
So
So, Carmel, do you still practice as a medical intuitive?
yes, I do.
Okay. So for the people who are watching, I would imagine there are people who want to connect with what you do, even if they don't get to connect with you directly. So how can people work with you, either directly or non-directly?
Well, they have to seek an appointment, sadly, and I'll briefly explain that. Before I died, I had so many clients needing desperately to see me that I was working 4 days a week, um, 7 hours each day. So four in the during the day and three in the evening. One day a weekend, and then every fourth weekend I'd be teaching people. So on average, I was seeing 24 to 30 people every week doing this energy work, running this energy work. And it literally drained me of life sufficiently
Yeah,
to,
I'm not surprised at all. Yeah.
and I made up my mind when I came back that, I think within 6 months of me returning to life, I was back in clinic seeing people and they were trying to crowd in on me like that again. I, you know, and I'm still repairing my brain. But, unfortunately, we had lots of kids because we also fostered three and expensive schools and mortgage and food and all this sort of stuff. But so I'm a lot harder to see and much more pedantic about when I will see people,
Yeah.
you know.
So how can
So
they reach you? Do you have a website? Do you have an
I
email?
do
How
have
do they?
I do have a website,
Right.
but I rarely use it. So
Okay.
they can look at it. It's got pretty pictures, but that's about it. I'm mostly on Facebook under Carmel Bell Medical Intuitive
Okay.
or LinkedIn, but the easiest way to connect to me is to send an email directly to the appointment booking service, which
Okay.
is actually my husband. He does all my bookings.
So
So that's
pretty.
Bernie, yep, BernieBell. So Bernie Bell 56 at yahoo.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes for everybody.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, Bernie Bell 56 at yahoo.com. Ta-da!
I
So
love
simple.
it.
And you just send him an email saying that you would like to see me. If you're to everybody out there, if you're a tire kicker, please, for your sake, I'm not cheap. So don't waste your money. Don't waste my time because there are people that I do actually need to see. Um, and there are plenty of other people out there who can prove to you that energy is real.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank
And
you.
I want to thank you for what you are doing. It is so amazing. I've never talked to anybody who's bringing in energy from the other side the way that you have described that you do this. And it's definitely got to be healing the collective. So thank you for doing this work and for staying.
Well, you're welcome. It's been a tough road, I can tell you.
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has. None of these incarnations seem to be the easy cakewalk that we wish them to be. But I think that the work that we're doing is definitely so important and so needed.
It is. But next time, I'm going to have like a very cushy life. No, that's it. That's
Don't
what
we
I'm
all
going
say that? We're like, when
Yeah.
I'm planning the next one, I'm putting less in that shopping cart before I.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite aware of that I am so unlikely to get that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank
Yeah.
you again. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Well, thank you. It's been lovely not meeting you all.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.